Consider the following case. A police officer comes up to you and says, excuse me, I see you have drugs on you. You are under arrest. And you respond to the officer by saying, no, 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 you don't understand. I'm a drug dealer. I was hired to do this job and deal drugs. So you can't hold me responsible. I'm just doing my job. Well, of course, they would never accept that. What if you said, yes, technically, I murdered someone, but you have to see, I am a hired assassin. And that place you just saw me rob, I'm part of a group that robs places for a living. That's how we make money, and this is our job. We are just doing our job, just like you, for God's sakes. So don't hold us responsible. Don't put us in jail, because we're not responsible so long as it's part of a job that we're doing. Well, of course, they would never accept that from you. So they know that the response that they use is totally unjustified. Look, murder is still murder. Even if done by a group of people, even if that group of people has camouflage costumes, even if that group calls itself the government group or the military group or the Marine group or the Army group, it does not matter. Even if some other group told that group to do so, kidnapping is still kidnapping, regardless of whether, wait, hold on, is the kidnapper getting paid? Wait, was the kidnapper told to do so by another person or group of persons? It's completely irrelevant. And theft is still theft. You do not have a right to initiate violence against peaceful people, or fraud for that matter. So really, the good cop, bad cop question can be disposed of decisively. So instead of you sending me the video of two cops playing basketball with a kid on his driveway, and then me sending you the Eric Garner video, then you sending me the video of a cop helping someone, and then us going back and forth for a year, we need only consider the following. 1, every cop has agreed as part of his or her job is to enforce laws, all of them. 2, many of the laws are manifestly unjust or even cruel and wicked. 3, therefore, every cop has agreed to act as an enforcer of laws that are manifestly unjust or even cruel and wicked. There are no good cops, Dr. Robert Higgs. Look, there's a lot of things that officers take an oath to put people in jail for that they're totally justified in doing. Opening up a business without a license, engaging in prostitution, gambling, consuming drugs, not chipping in for the welfare state or the warfare state, building something on your property without permission from the mass murdering, theft-funded ruling class. So if you've taken an oath to put people in cages for these things, you're a bad person. It's not, well, let's look at the good and the bad. No, sorry, I don't need to hear the Jeffrey Epstein background story or the Harvey Weinstein or the Mexican drug cartel murderers. I don't need to hear all the good that they've done. They do stimulate the economy when they purchase and increase consumer demand. That's completely irrelevant. They initiate violence against peaceful people. They are bad people, period. Mark Passio says, the painful truth, the order follower always bears more moral culpability than the order giver, because the order follower is the one who actually performed the action, and in taking such action, actually brought the resultant harm into physical manifestation. Order following is the pathway to every form of evil and chaos in our world. It should never be seen as a virtue by anyone who considers themselves a moral human being. Order followers have ultimately been personally responsible and morally culpable for every form of slavery and every single totalitarian regime that has ever existed on the face of the earth.
Getting back to this, a lot of people will come back with these people like the police and other state officials. They're just following orders and they're just doing their jobs. And that sounds so, for lack of a better word, boomer to me. They're just doing their jobs. But you have taken that on. So what would you say to somebody who says, well, he may not like the law either, but what do you expect him to do?
It's a strange thing that people use this as an argument, because it sounds almost absurd when you describe like what they're really doing. So imagine I said, okay, like I decide to work for you, like I'm gonna become your new employee, and you say, all right, I'm gonna pay you like $10,000 a month plus health insurance and give you a pension if you do whatever I say. And then I'm like, that sounds great. And for the first couple of days, you have me like file books or something like that and do some photo editing or whatnot. And then on day number 5, you're like, I need you to go beat the crap out of that little kid over there. And then I go and do it. That would be absurd. Obviously, I wouldn't acquire an obligation or permission to do that simply because you ordered me to do it. And it'd be weird for me to say, oh, no, you don't understand. The reason I have to do it is because I promised to follow his commands in exchange for money. Like, that's not a justification.
doesn't sound very flattering when you put it that way.
And that's not how promises work. What a promise can do is you have a range of freedom, things you're permitted to do. And when you make a promise, you restrict that range. So I promised my wife, all the promises that come with marriage. One of the things I did was I took the range of women I'm allowed to sleep with and shrink it down to one, right? That's what happens in a marriage. I have like now an obligation to like provide for her and do certain things to her that I wouldn't normally have. I restricted my freedom in that way in virtue of my promise keeping. But you don't, in virtue of making a promise, lose your prior obligations. So you have a pre-existing obligation to respect other people's rights, to treat them as ends in themselves, and to avoid harming them in certain ways. And you can't lose that obligation simply because you make a promise to another person to do what they say. Yeah. So it's weird that people would think otherwise. There's other kind of arguments about following orders that are a little bit more sophisticated, where they say things like, look, it might very well be that you think something is wrong, but your superiors, you have good reason to believe your superiors have superior knowledge to you, and so you should defer to them. And there are cases where that makes sense, but again, notice it's nothing special about government. We had strong reason to believe that like the zombie apocalypse virus is now widespread across the world. And in this sci-fi story, you are the scientist who's really good at identifying who has the zombie apocalypse virus. And you like yell to me, shoot that person right over there right away. Well, maybe I should defer to you because I have good reason to think you know whether that person's infected or not. We could imagine cases like that with the government where, they know something is wrong, or they know this, they have knowledge which makes something permissible, and you have good reason to think they're telling the truth and that they know better than you. So that sometimes happens, but that's not special to government again. And at the same time, we also have good reason to think that governments often lie about this stuff. So you should be quite skeptical about their claims to superior knowledge.
I want to talk about your most recent work, a book called When All Else Fails, The Ethics of Resistance to State Injustice. What is the moral parity thesis?
Good. The moral parity thesis is the claim that the conditions under which you are able to resist injustice conducted by a government official, even one acting in the capacity of their office, are exactly the same as the conditions under which you're allowed to resist me. So basically, there's one set of rules of self-defense and one set of rules for when you're allowed to use violence or subterfuge or deceit or other things to defend other people from injustice. And that same set of rules applies to government agents as it does to defense against civilians. They are one and the same. So government agents are not owed any greater the reverse to that thesis, the thing I'm arguing against, is what you might call the special immunity thesis, which says that government agents, either when they're working within their office or not, or maybe just democratic government agents, but some government agents enjoy a kind of special immunity against resistance and actions to resist their injustice. So if I were to try to kill you right now just for the hell of it because I'm having a bad day and I'm misbehaving, everyone thinks that you'd be allowed to defend yourself against me and that other people will be allowed to intervene to defend you against me. But most people think that if a police officer has a bad day and starts beating the crap out of somebody, that you just have to stop and let them do it. You can complain later, you can file, maybe there should be a formal investigation, but you're not permitted to intervene violently. You're not permitted to lie to the government. You're not permitted to resist them, except under really extreme circumstances. And so the simple claim is just, whatever you can do in self-defense or defense of others against anything that I, Jay Brennan, do, you can do against the U.S. president.
Now, Mark, you have been very critical of the police. However, I guess no one's told you that they're just doing their job and they don't make the laws. Congress makes the laws, for heaven's sake. Mark, why are you so critical of police when they don't make the laws and they're just doing their job?
Well, the SS, the Schutzstaffel, the highest levels of the Nazi Wehrmacht and High Command in Nazi Germany, also issued orders, and the people who were undergoing war crimes tribunals at Nuremberg offered that same excuse, the Nuremberg defense, and it didn't work there because there is no excuse for following immoral orders. If someone is commanding you and saying we're giving you an order to go and suppress someone else's natural rights through coercion and violence, the answer is you have to say no and or quit that job. See, I don't really believe that there is any use or reason for police forces to exist because I believe in total personal responsibility. That means that each individual should take it upon themselves for their own defense because no one is closer to your own body than you. First of all, it is impossible for someone else to actually engage in self-defense for another individual because you can never get there faster than the individual themselves. This is one of the first and foremost principles of all martial arts, including self-defense with firearms. So I don't think that we should try to give any group of people a special select group of rights that we say that other people don't possess, because as soon as you do that, you're creating a differential in power, and that's always going to be abused by people who are flawed human beings. And it's a fundamentally flawed axiomatic idea from the very beginning, from Jump Street. That is a flawed axiomatic idea to say anyone else should be personally responsible for your self-defense. No, you need to be personally responsible for your self-defense and learn self-defense techniques through martial arts and the usage of firearms.
Larken, are the police responsible for enforcing immoral laws?
Absolutely. And as much as I talk about how voters and advocates of government think like children, that is even more true of cops and enforcers. The ironic thing is they pretend to be, we're the tough, rugged bad guys keeping you. They are physically and intellectually the most immature people there are. Because when you challenge them and say, you're doing something immoral, they say, I'm just doing what I'm told. It's like a little kid in classroom. The teacher told me to do this, so I'm doing it. And, I can't be expected to have a conscience or a brain or the ability to distinguish right from wrong or take responsibility for what I am personally doing. It really is the most cowardly and evil thing anybody can do, to give away their own judgment and conscience and free will and blindly obey some imaginary outside authority. And that's what cops and soldiers are.
And of course, they would never extend that courtesy to you. Yes, officer, I was dealing drugs, but this is my job. My Pablo Escobar boss told me to do this, so go lobby him to change his policy of selling things. Don't cage me. I'm just doing my job. I'm just a hired assassin. I'm just a hired bank robber and house invader. It's so obvious. Once you apply the principle that they pretend to believe in consistently, you see they don't apply it anywhere in their own life.